Some companies are finding that the cloud was a huge mistake. Here are three reasons why that's the case.
Yeah!
Welcome back to the Cloud Insider channel. My name's Dave Linthicum, author, speaker, B-list geek, and your host here today in our journey to find out about the realities of cloud computing and the truth about generative AI. So let's get started. So the idea of this video came from lots of questions that I've received since I posted this video up here, why companies are kicking cloud to the curb. Took off, everybody's interested in the topic. And the question was, what's going on here? Why are people rethinking the cloud as their host for applications and data sets? And so I'm going to dig down on three of the main reasons that I'm seeing out there why the cloud for many organizations was a huge mistake. And in essence, getting down to the details in terms of what's going on, based on the video I did 30 days ago. So let's dig into it. So some of the things that I found, and there's a recent survey, and it's linked in this blog here. Yeah, you can go ahead and click on it down below. Don't look now, but 25% of organizations surveyed in the United Kingdom have already moved half or more of their cloud-based workloads back to on-premise infrastructures, according to a recent study by Citrix, a cloud software group business unit. The survey questioned 350 IT leaders on their current approaches to cloud computing. The survey also showed that 93% of the respondents had been involved with a cloud repatriation project in the past 3 years. That's a lot of repatriation. So, as we talked about 30 days ago, why is this going on? And let's dig down into the details as to why this is the case. First, we need to come to the reality that the cloud is not for every application and every data set out there, and it never was. So there are lots of applications that are going to be a great fit for the cloud, and there are lots of applications that should never exist on the cloud. And in many cases, those are the applications and data sets that are being repatriated or put back on the existing systems where they found them before they moved them into a public cloud environment. So the cloud, you keep in mind that the cloud is for specific types of applications and data, such as applications that leverage cloud native features, your ability to build things using a cloud native ecosystem, cloud native security, cloud native application development, cloud native scalability. If those are going to be a requirement for your application, which sometimes they are, then the cloud's going to be a better fit. You're able to find a value in leveraging an ecosystem. For example, everybody who's moving into a generative AI platform, it's easier to build generative AI applications in the cloud because you have a complete ecosystem that's there for you. They have the tooling, they have the testing, they have the security things that are listed there within their portfolio, and you just bring them into your environment. Where if you're building something like that on premise, you have to buy the hardware, you have to configure the software, you have to build the ecosystem by yourself. And so in this case, it comes on demand out of the cloud. However, not every application is going to need that. And so lots of applications are perfectly okay working standalone without an ecosystem. And many cases, those shouldn't be on the cloud. And you have special needs, as we just mentioned, such as generative AI, when the system where you're building business analytics, where there's something that the cloud is able to do, scalability, the ability to provide AI tools and technology, the ability to provide DevOps as a service, all these sorts of things that you need specifically that are going to add specific values, then the cloud is going to be the right choice for you. So, what are the reasons that enterprises are finding that the cloud was a huge mistake and something that had to be corrected? And we're seeing lots of repatriation going on. So, obviously, we're finding these mistakes and they're trying to correct them. First is not considering the cost. We talked about this in the last video as well. The cloud, in many cases, is an emotional lot, not a logical decision. So people just made the declaration back in 2013, 2014 that they're moving into the cloud. They viewed it as the platform of the future. And there wasn't a lot of analysis of what that actually meant in terms of how much money that was going to cost them to do the migration, to do the modernization, to operate the systems in the cloud. And as we saw a few years ago, certainly after the pandemic, we got these huge cloud bills that the enterprises were seeing and were complaining about, rightfully so. As I write about in my book, these bills were normally, or the costs were normally 2.5 times what they thought they were going to be. And they figured out it was too expensive and it was the wrong decision for them. And so instead of hemorrhaging cash to maintain these applications and these data sets, they just went ahead and put them back on the original systems where they came from. Sometimes it's a mainframe, sometimes it's a lamp stack, things like that. So not having a complete understanding of the operational costs of the cloud, including SecOps, security operations, and not understanding the types of skills you're going to need. And many times people complain to me about the cost of the skills and their inability to get the skills. And that becomes a core limitation to what they're doing, not considering the cost of changing the operations model around using cloud computing, not considering the cost of data integration between the cloud and on-premise. Sometimes these egress and ingress fees are going to be huge. They've been relaxing those recently, which is, kind of another news item to discuss, but it's very expensive if you're moving data in between the on-premise systems and the public cloud providers, and not considering the cost of lots of business needs, such as business continuity and disaster recovery, and doing so in the cloud. And so they just ultimately didn't consider everything that was included in the cost of maintaining these systems, moving these systems, modernizing these systems in the cloud environment. And they balked at the bill, and they just went ahead and hit the reset button and put them back where they came from. And in many cases, people are still running their original equipment in their data centers. And so they just need to expand that a bit. And it's basically reutilizing those assets again, which many times they already paid for it. So in other words, it's already a sunk cost. So cost is a huge factor in this. Next would be not considering future needs. So in other words, they move something into the cloud, and they've had new requirements show up, like requiring data from outside the public cloud provider, such as the on-premise systems or other clouds. Didn't account for that. And applications that need to transmit data to on-premise applications or other clouds, particular security that they can't live up to within a cloud environment. In other words, they're doing something where they have an odd compliance issue to deal with or non-security issue to deal with, where the cloud is going to be contraindicated for that. And so, in other words, put something in the cloud and probably running fairly good, probably expensive to run it there, but they're okay with it. But suddenly some requirement comes along that they didn't anticipate. Data transmission, data consumption typically is the one that I see, special security requirements, special governance requirements, special compliance requirements. And in some cases, you can't transmit data outside the country of origin, things like that, which compelled them to move from the cloud back to on-premise. And expensive, obviously, this is a huge mistake. It's going to cost them many millions of dollars to fix, and they're going to expose themselves to some risk in doing that. But not considering the future needs of the application and data set is a huge issue that I see out there time and time again. And the final reason that people realize that the cloud was a huge mistake is not considering performance requirements. So application latency issues need significant work to be corrected. And so if we have application latency between the on-premise systems and the systems that exist in the cloud, it's very expensive to remove that latency. You have to run high-speed private circuits between the cloud and the on-premise system. And it really doesn't get to the limitations of cloud computing. It gets to the fact that we've developed an application that requires low latency between portions of the application, sometimes the application and the data, for instance. And the cloud is just causing too much latency just by what it is, the architecture that we're leveraging. And so people can't solve those latency processes on the cheap or solve the latency problems on the cheap. So they go ahead and choose to put the thing back on premise, where the latency typically isn't going to be an issue because the networks are going to be very tightly coupled. The applications, the data are sitting together. And so we kind of use an architecture that we've always, used for the last 30 years, where we put the applications and the data that's being consumed by the application as close together as possible. So the open internet typically is slow. That's how most people access the cloud. So everybody's working remote and obviously leveraging the internet as the primary mechanism to get at core business data and core business applications. In some cases, the performance latency in those scenarios is going to be unacceptable, and they're getting to true productivity issues. And so they're moving it back on premise so they can control the latency between the remote workers and their access to the data they need to do the work. So we're supporting a remote workforce is kind of exacerbating this problem. Everybody's using the open internet as a way of accessing these systems. And in some cases, using the cloud provides too much latency. It's something that they can't fix just because of the architecture of the environment, just because of what it is. And so they go ahead and make the tough decision of moving it back on premise, where the latency is going to be more controlled. They're going to be closer to the systems, and therefore the performance should be better. So the cloud can't match the performance of some traditional systems as well, such as mainframes and on-premise high-performance computing environments. So we talked about this in the mainframe video a couple of videos ago, where the mainframe doesn't seem to be going away, and that's because we have these very huge honking processors that can do a lot in a very short amount of time, and the cloud typically doesn't have an analog for them. So we can't replace them if things are in the cloud, at least so easily. I understand there's emulators, and we can do code. Code generators and things like that. There's always a way to do it if you have enough money and time, but it's uneconomically viable to do that in the cloud. So they just go ahead and leverage the high performance computing environments and their mainframe systems and do so on premise. And so that's a decision I see people making a lot. Well, that's all I have for you today. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, check out my book, check out my blog on InfoWorld, check out my courses on LinkedIn Learning. I'm working with the Cube Research now. Check out my work over there. I'm looking forward to hearing from all of you. Please comment below in terms of what topics you'd like to see, and some feedback on this topic as well. And looking forward to the next video. You guys take care. Bye.